been a few days since my last post. I left off about moving in with my dad and how it was different. It's kind of a lifestyle shock of having food in the fridge, having soda whenever I wanted, cereal whenever I wanted. My dad would come over when I lived with my mom and took me to do my clothes on the weekend. Well, he would pick me up and we would do my clothes usually on a Sunday. And we would do clothes and he would take me somewhere to eat and then drop me back off at home. And I just got so accustomed to that lifestyle that eventually I got tired of believing what my mom would say about him being abusive, because I didn't really experience it really when I was a weakened child. So I moved in with him after we caught 43 misdemeanors in one night, and it was a change. It was a big shock. My stepmom did a lot for me while we were there, but eventually she left my dad for another guy because my dad was abusive to her, verbally, physically. But there was women all in and out of our apartment on a regular basis. Started going to a junior high in another city that was literally like 5 minutes away. And that's because there wasn't an elementary that was close enough. And decided to go to another one, and it worked out well. I met some different kind of friends, went to school with some different kind of people. It was actually a junior high. Yeah, it was a junior high. And that lasted for like a year until we had to move. We ended up having to move because my father, who already had a strike and was a felon, had I think it was a Colt 22 6-shooter and a gun belt. And the gun belt was hanging on the wall, kind of like a decoration. The gun wasn't loaded, but the gun belt had bullets in the little bullet slots, and the gun was sticking in the holster. And the police, I guess, got called because me and my younger friends were kind of partying at my dad's house, and one of them got sick and went home eventually and told their parents what happened. Cops came over, found the gun belt hanging on my dad's wall. But what they did miss is a quarter pound of weed that my dad's dealer came over and while they were there and hid it in the oven. They opened up a lot of the cabinets. The one thing they didn't do is open the oven, and they didn't find the weed that was in there. So luckily my dad only went to jail for the gun and him being a felon, and I think that's in California. That's another felony. So he did some years, or he did like a year and a half, no, 6 months to a year in the what they call the honor farm. And when he went to jail, I had nowhere to go. So my dad asked my Uncle Greg, and my Uncle Greg took me in and let me live with them. And my Uncle Greg would wake up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, get ready for work. About 5:30, he would take me to the corner of where we used to live. So my uncle lived in Riverbank, which is about 20 minutes away from where my uncle lived. So my uncle would put my bike in the back of his truck, and he would drop me off at 6 o'clock in the morning at the Westdale Commons in Modesto on the corner, and I would ride my bike from there to Salida Elementary, and I would probably be there like 45 minutes to an hour early every morning. But that's because I didn't want to change high school or junior highs at the time. But it wasn't cruel at all, or it wasn't like, being an ass. It was working around my uncle's schedule. And I'm really thankful for my Uncle Greg, because he took me in and he treated me very well. I didn't have to hear the yelling or the bitching that my dad did. Maybe because I acted different around my uncle. Maybe. But my Uncle Greg took really good care of me, and his fridge and cabinets were a lot more stocked than what my dad's were. So I went from being malnourished and extremely sick because I couldn't eat because of how malnourished I was, to gaining a little bit of weight, not getting fat, but you couldn't see my ribs or any of my bones anymore. And that happened for like 7-8 months to a year or so. And eventually my dad got out of jail, got his job back, wherever it was, doing roofing. And then he got a place over on the east side of Modesto. And as soon as he got a place, moved in with him. Started going to La Loma Junior High. My very first day there, after being enrolled, walking through the hallway, and some girl named Donna, her last name is White. Donna came up, kissed me, and I was like, what the hell? That was the first time a female's actually done that in my young life. And she was beautiful. Blonde hair, cute, gifted up top. And I was like, what the heck? And she said, oh, you're the guy down the road, da-da-da. No, that wasn't me. And that was my first day in junior high. Eventually I made friends with a buddy who's now my brother-in-law, Zach. Zach was cool as fuck. And he was one of my first friends, next to this Asian dude, Noi. Very strong accent, but he, hung out with Asian Crips and whatnot. And we started living our life on the east side of Modesto, and eventually I took wood shop there, and it was cool, and never really had any problems because I made friends with Zach, and Zach wasn't exactly a bully, but people didn't fuck with Zach. But we're living in these apartments over by Downey High. And at that time, my dad, before my dad went to jail, to the Honor Farm, there was a guy named Dave Schroeder. He lived with us. Apparently one day my dad found him sleeping out in his car after seeing him for about weeks on end. Hey man, what are you doing sleeping out in your car? Well, my dad had a good heart, even though he was an ass. He still is. He's probably worse now because he's gotten older. But he made friends with Dave and basically said, hey man, just, I'll give you a place to stay for a while. Just when I'm at work, sell my weed, sell my cocaine. And so Dave did, and Dave was like a brother. And Dave was really cool, but Dave was also a partier. There's times where was sitting there watching Natural Born Killers, and him and his buddy are frying on acid, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought they were just high, because, you know, my dad would get high at that time too, and weed never really bothered me. It never really impacted my life like that. I didn't think anything of it. But eventually my dad went to jail, lost track of Dave. We don't know what happened. Moved to the east side. Somehow Dave got in touch with my dad, started kind of like staying with us again, selling coke for my dad, selling weed for my dad. But eventually, there's this short motherfucker with bright curly hair and a Queensland healer. His name is Rick. We ain't gonna get into his last name for legal purposes. That was my buddy Alvaro would say. Something happened, some kind of drug deal or something went bad, and Dave and Rick didn't like each other. Well, apparently Rick somehow gave someone some dope, and it got into Dave's hands, and my sister Bridget was back living with us. My unintentional mom, right? So she's back living with us, and Dave's living with us, and me and my dad in these apartments over off of Lucerne. And eventually Dave got a hold of some bad dope. Rumors had it came from Rick, and it was a setup, but we don't know what happened. And Dave OD'd right in front of us. We lived on this corner apartment, and CJ and her boyfriend, damn, I forget his name, Rico and CJ. CJ was white, Rico was black. Rico was crazy, but I think he had sickle cell, and eventually later in life that claimed his life. But CJ had a daughter, her name was Deborah, and I was so in love with Deborah from probably the second or third time that I seen her. And eventually we started going to the same school together, and years later we started hanging out. I still love Deborah. To this day. But she has everything right going for her, and I wouldn't dare get in the middle of that. I try not to reach out and contact her because of respect for their relationship, but I still want to say hi. I still want to talk. And if I did, I know she would pick up regardless of what her boyfriend, baby daddy, whatever he is. He seems like a cool dude. Seems really cool. But I don't want to get in the middle of that. So instead of calling and saying hi or texting or, talk about what's going on, I just mind my business. But Dave was partying over at CJ and Rico's house, and Dave collapsed on the floor. And it wasn't my first time seeing somebody die, and I think I was probably in 7th grade. I don't even know, what is that, like 10 years old? 10 years old. And it wasn't my first time seeing somebody die, but it was my first time seeing somebody die of an overdose or poison or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And Dave is just laying there on the ground with his red face and his long blonde hair, and he's on his back, and his head is tilted like this, and he's looking out the door, and me and my older sister Bridget are just sitting there staring at him. My sister's crying hilarious. Not hilarious, hysterically crying. My dad, I don't know if my dad came out or what, but I remember saying Rico, not CJ. Rico was, I guess, closed the door and was trying to hide the other drugs or get rid of the other drugs that were in the apartment. Dave wasn't a fan of black people for the most part. Well, he was okay. He had a few black friends, but it's not like that was his demographic that he always hung out with. Maybe the party and all that, but that's about it. But earlier that year, my sister was so in love with Tupac and playing Tupac and singing his lyrics left and right that it pissed Dave off. And Dave, oh, I hope he dies. And then what happens? Tupac eventually shot and killed. I think a year later, on Tupac's death anniversary, is the day that Dave died. My sister would know more about this. Bridget, if your ass is out there, get in my comments and give a little skinny on it. So Dave died. And then I think not even a week later, the entire apartment complex got raided. But there was a couple times while living in those apartments where I pissed my dad off. Pushed his buttons. My dad figured, oh, he's old enough now, he can take it. I pushed his buttons a little too far, and what'd he do? Hit me like 3, maybe 4 times, close fists, while I covered up and went in the corner, and it hurt. It hurt. There was another time he smacked the shit out of me in the back of the head. My head hit the wall. Constant yelling about stupid shit. Very nitpicky yelling just because he was in a bad mood. Me and my sister Bridget had this little joke. Oh, it's Sunday, stay away from Dad. My sister said that my dad's mom, who passed away when he was 13, and my dad had to pull the plug on her because he was the oldest son. My sister said that my dad's grandma, my Mexican grandma, passed away on a Sunday. And that's why my dad was always so fucking angry on Sundays. Even if you stay away, he would find a reason to yell at you. Oh, fuck, where are these kids at? What the fuck you guys doing in there? Just any reason to get mad on a Sunday. And he still does this today. I can almost guarantee it. He probably does it every day. But every Sunday, he's still a giant asshole. Anything to get him going. But we moved from Lucerne on the east side of Modesto to a place on Carver. It's a fourplex. And we lived on the front side of the fourplex. Before that move, every single apartment was raided. I think there was like 20-something, 30-something apartments. And I think like 18 of those had people going to, or 16 of those had people going to jail, including the apartment manager, who was either cooking meth or she was growing weed or both or what. I don't know. One of the DEA undercovers, my sister swears up and down, I think his last name was Keller. Keller was also kind of trying to run around in Oakdale from my first video. He was also with the police force and eventually DEA out in Oakdale, California. and we moved from there. But Officer Keller was around there, and I know a lot of females thought he was cute or whatever, probably. I don't know why my sister remembers him so vividly or so fucking well, but I know he's let my sister go on a few things. He's let my mom go on one or two things, but he's arrested a lot of people. And this takes a turn like 3 different times. 3 run-ins I have in with this guy. Once in Oakdale, the raid in Modesto, and another time like 10 years later on a different side of Modesto. But this Keller dude, he was gonna take me and my sister and my dad and all of us, and Keller came in and said, no, not them, leave them alone, they're alright, you don't have to worry about them, they're not a part of this. Which is fucking ridiculous, because my dad was selling weed and coke. Dave was in and out of our house all the time, especially when the weekend came. Coke here, weed there, gone. Dad re-ups, comes back, does the same thing. So we moved to the north side of Modesto on Carver, and that's where I started hanging out with some young norteños and some other fools. There was Delvon, he was cool, but Delvon, he was the only, I hung around with a lot of Mexican dudes. Paul Velasquez, he's in prison right now for, I think, a gang shooting, 3 murders, or 3 attempted murders, 1 murder, 2 attempted. I don't know, but Paul Velasquez, he was a real close homie. And he was a norteño. Well, he was a slighted bulldog, him and his family. And they were all cool. Even his big ass brother. His brother was a dick, but he was still cool. But there was Delvon. He was one of the black dudes we hung out with. He was cool. But he just always seemed like he was better than everybody else. He still does that to this day. I went back to Cali and went to a bar and seen his ass there, and he was just, full of confidence, like he has always been. But his cousin Lou, he was a blood from Bedrock. Lou was cool as shit, but you didn't see a lot of that dude around there. There was quite a distance from where Lou lived to where we lived. And then there was Jerome. Jerome was cool as fuck, but Jerome wasn't into the gang banging. He didn't think he was better than anybody. Hell, Jerome tried acid with me and my folks and my family for the first time. And after that, after he took a few hits of acid, we didn't see that fool for a while. He became a little more scarce. But I hung out with Danny and Sammy Galvin and little ass Daniel. Daniel was cool, but he was annoying as shit. And they would always come over and we would smoke and always party Monday through fucking Sunday, every single day. Buy weed off my dad, get a hold of some alcohol, party. My dad was strict about a lot of shit, but he didn't give 2 shits about drugs. As long as it wasn't meth. I was never really into cocaine, so I never really knew how he would respond to that, because I knew my dad liked cocaine and he liked to sell it, but he wasn't a big cokehead. He just sold it more often. But we're living at Carver, and my sister graduated high school, and my dad said, "Don't worry, honey, you don't have to work. You can just stay home and cook and clean for me." And that's pretty much what my sister did. My sister cooked. My sister would get up in the morning and make my dad breakfast majority of the time. My dad was teaching her how to be a woman for somebody, probably. Or at least it's easier and more it's easier and more convenient for her to make his sandwich at 4 in the morning, knowing she don't have a job or ain't got shit to do but hang around the house, sell his weed, you know. And my sister would get up and she would clean when she was time for her to get up. Well, she wouldn't get up and clean. She would get up, make him breakfast at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. My dad would take off for work. She would go back to bed. Get up around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. My sister shaved her eyebrows. So my sister would smoke a joint and then sit there and try to do her eyebrows. And it would take her an hour to 2 hours till eventually she got better. And my sister would get all makeup up and she'd go in there and clean the house that we lived in. And I would go to school at like 7:30 and hop on the bus or go around the corner and wait for the bus to pick me up and ride the bus, because it was like 3 to 5 miles away from where I lived, my high school, which was in Modesto. And sometimes I would go around the corner about 2 houses down from Delvaughn's apartment. And I say apartment because there's like 5 or 6 apartments there. But a couple doors down, there was a... Don't cancel me on this. I don't know what he was, but he was... I don't know if he was Arab or what. I don't know if he was Indian or what. Racially incorrect as I may be, I don't know what he was, other than a cool ass fucking dude to hang out with. But he knew I always had weed too, so I'd roll out 7:30 in the morning, walk by his house, wait for the bus. That fool comes out in his old ass Cadillac. It was like a 1980 something yellow Cadillac, but he had some slump in the trunk and he ain't had no rims. But you know, his family moved here and they were given a business by the U.S. government to start your business, take care of your family, and here's some money to get a place. And so that fool would pick me up in his Cadillac and we would smoke on the way to high school. And I would always end up walking home because that fool, he left early. He was like a grade or two higher than me. But eventually, about 4 blocks down from where Sergey and Delvon lived, was the homeboys Sammy and Danny. Danny Galvin, Sammy Galvin. Young Norteños, always running the block, with a few other fools. Raymond, and he had like another brother or two that always hung out. And this is where I kind of wish my dad would have done something a little differently. I like the partying and hanging out, but I honestly, if my dad would have been a little bit stricter about the drug and partying thing, it might have done a lot better for me. A lot of my life, I didn't get a lot of push. Oh, you need to go to college. Oh, you need to do this. Oh, you need to do that. No. They said, we don't care if you smoke weed or get drunk. Just don't let it affect your schoolwork. I don't care what you do. Just don't do meth or crank and graduate high school. So I rode that tightrope for a long time. And that's why me and the boys, me and Sandy and Danny and little man, Daniel lived right next door. This motherfucker's like, I was like 5'1" and he was like 4'3", 4'4". He was like a grade or younger than I was. And Daniel, for some reason, always brought around fine females for some reason. He could mac like no other, or just get them to come and hang out, and he would. But he acted like a gangbanger, you know what I mean? All 4'3", 4'5" of him. Motherfucker was short as hell. Well, now as an adult, he's still short as hell. He may be barely 5 foot, maybe 5'1" at most, if that. But I'm 5'3", 5'4", 5'4". But little man always brought around the girls, and there was one time he brought this girl around that I really loved. No, I don't know about love, but I fell in love with very quick seeing her. Her name was Valerie. Valerie didn't make any appearances in person after the night she came over, but I've talked to her later on in life, not knowing it was her, coming to find out it was her. You know damn well what she was doing, Valerie. But Valerie, I had a lot of love for her. I still got love for her, but she came over and partied with us on one of my birthdays, and we ended up sleeping together. We were both young, and I woke up the next morning and she was out with my sister smoking weed, and I'm pretty sure we had breakfast that morning. And I told her, I'll walk you home, and she was not having it. I don't know why, but that's someone I probably shouldn't have let Valerie walk out of my life, because she was a good woman, and I just knew it. And we'll get to her later. But my dad, he just graduated high school. That's all he wanted. Well, eventually I did graduate high school. It didn't help with bumps in the road and whatnot. Verbal altercations me and my dad would constantly get into. But I don't know if I can call my dad kind, but my dad had a big heart, even though he was a fucking asshole. While we lived at that place on Carver, my dad eventually brought my Uncle Bobby, his brother Bobby, in to live with us. And because my Uncle Bobby was going through some things, my dad was like, as long as you're clean. Oh yeah, I'm clean. They just got me on this medication. Well, just weird shit started. We started finding weird shit all over the house, and he got into doing dope, and eventually I got into doing dope because I wanted to try it. Because my dad was a cokehead, and so we tried some coke, and I didn't really care for it. But the minute I told my Uncle Bobby, I want to try that other shit you guys try. Oh, no. I said, man, look, either you're gonna get it or I'm gonna get it. And he felt, well, it's probably better to get it from me because it'll be clean and somewhat safe compared to you going out to a random person and just getting it and doing it. You know what I mean? And so I tried meth, and my uncle, he was a straight tweaker. My Uncle Bob was a hardcore tweaker. That motherfucker, he'd be the one out there on a 10-speed doing wheelies in the middle of the night, just riding his bike everywhere. And eventually I followed him. And my dad knew it. Eventually. But my sister went and told on me and all my friends that were tweaking with my Uncle Bob, and he kicked my Uncle Bob out. But while we were living on Carver, my dad eventually let my Uncle Bobby move in with us. My mom, who my dad wasn't with for over 10, 12 years, maybe even longer, eventually he let my mom move back in, but she moved into the garage with her boyfriend. And eventually they had to go. While we were living closer to Salida in the Westdale Commons, my dad used to sell a lot of bud and a lot of coke to this dude named Dan. Dan was an electrician. He made really good money, and he was a good customer of my dad's. Well, eventually Dan got heavily into alcohol and became an alcoholic. So much so, Dan lost his job and lost his place and lost his license as an electrician. Eventually, Dan was homeless. My dad seen him and said, "Come on, man, we'll take care of you." So eventually, we had Dan come over, and Dan started living with us for a while. We called him Double D because Dan the drunk. Why the fuck not? But we also had a rooster that my sister got with Stella while they were smuggling weed back from Mexico. And my sister called the rooster Corona because that's where she got it, and it was a baby boy. Well, obviously it was a boy, right? A rooster is a boy and a chicken's a girl. So here we are in a suburban neighborhood with a fucking rooster waking people up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, crowing his ass off. Well, Dan would always feed that chicken a cap full of beer whenever he'd get a new beer. And Dan, he'd get like the St. Ives, the Old English, or the Cobra. If you remember the Cobra, 40 ounces, 32 ounces, you know. Dan wouldn't be around all the time. He'd go out and panhandle and hustle some money up, enough to buy him a few beers. Once he'd get enough to buy him some alcohol, he'd get his alcohol, come back at the house and drink, and just hang around and talk shit. I don't know what happened. But, I'm missing one thing. Dan was also not just an alcoholic, he turned into a crackhead before he lost everything. And whether it was crack or the alcohol, doesn't matter. He lost all his shit because of that. And I don't know what happened when he was living with us, but eventually he wasn't living with us. And always kept in contact with my friend Zach from La Loma. And Zach also hung out with some Crips that were over by where we lived, on the east side. But eventually we moved to the north side, and we still kept in contact with Zach. Zach had a brother, I think, adoptive. I don't know if they were both adoptive. No, I think it was just Chad, or we call him Chongo. And Chongo eventually ended up getting with my sister and taking my sister from my dad's apartment once we got kicked out of there. Once we got kicked out of there, Chongo and my sister got together eventually and started their own little family. But while we're living at that house on Carver Road, it was a fourplex. Well, if you come out the driveway of the fourplex and you don't look left, you don't look right, but you look right out that driveway, there's a road to another little community right there. Some Hispanic dude was changing his brakes and he forgot to bleed it. So he hopped in his car and made a U-turn and came down that road and went to hit his brakes at the stop sign. Boom. Right into the bathroom of our house where my mom at that time just got done taking a shower. We just got done smoking. So what did we do? We had to call the landlord. I think we called my dad first. Landlord comes over and, well, you guys are smoking. It smells like weed in here. And so eventually, once they said, okay, you guys can't live here, we had to leave. I imagine my dad got tired of our shit. My sister was already gone. My mom I don't know why she was there or whatever. No, she must have left. I think she moved to Southside Modesto and went to a trailer park right after the 9th Street Bridge. And it was ghetto, man. We always talked shit about that place whenever we drove by, went by there, anything. And it's kind of ironic. I think the word's ironic because eventually, after we got kicked out of that house on Carver, I basically had nowhere else to go. I graduated high school. I was an adult. I was still partying instead of looking for work. And I moved to that trailer park on the south side of Modesto, 9th Street Bridge. I think it was called Butler's Camp at the time. So I don't know if the word's ironic or what, but I think that's it. We talk all that shit. And then, you know, a year or two later, we end up in that I end up in the trailer park. And I think my dad just got tired of us always ruining everywhere we lived. And I don't know where my dad went. I think my dad got another apartment over down the road from the old Food for Less, but a little further back. I don't know, but I wasn't supposed to be living there, or I wasn't, you're an adult now, bye, see ya. So what did I do? I went and stayed with my mom in Butler's Camp. She got me a job working for a company at RGIS, who eventually there was a class action lawsuit where they had to pay out money to people because they were stealing people's overtime. But moved to Butler's Camp, and I kind of cleaned up from doing dope, and eventually, maybe a few months after moving back there, I got back into doing dope. Started losing a lot of weight, but I was constantly going to the gym with my old neighbor before we moved there, so I was looking pretty good back then. And then I got into dope and got sucked up, but I was still doing workouts and stuff, so my muscles and body looked really cut, really defined, not realizing that it was the dope that was sucking the life out of me. I was smoking crystal meth while my mom and her boyfriend Alan were snorting it. Alan would smoke it, shoot it, snort it wherever, because remember from the first video, my mom, you could not have a date or have my mom get to love you unless you were a felon. And Alan Naukaitis, rest his soul, he was a felon. Him and my mom got a place in the trailer park, but it was a small house in the trailer park, and I was living with them. And my mom was constantly buying dope with her job while doing her job. So was I. Eventually, I quit that job and started selling dope. And got into an argument one time. Verbal abuse was a big thing, no matter where I lived, no matter who I lived with. Verbal abuse did a lot of fucking damage. But eventually I broke my right hand after an argument with my mom, and then her boyfriend was going to get into it. And I just walked out and I slammed the door. I knew it was a solid wood door, and I just punched that door as hard as I could to take out my frustration. Broke my wrist, and eventually my mom and her tweaker boyfriend didn't want me there because I wasn't giving them dope. I was making them buy it at a discount, but they, and I was selling it to make profit and a little bit of dope to do for myself. And the little bit of dope, they always wanted to do it. Well, I didn't fucking snort it. I didn't like snorting it. I haven't touched any of that shit in years. I haven't really talked about it either. But eventually, she kicked me out. And I went to go live with my sister for a little bit. My sister Bridget and her boyfriend Chongo on the east side, Scenic, some small little shithole. But my sister and Chongo just had their first kid, and my sister's always taking care of me, and I love her. And She's always tried to take care of me, but she's failed to take care of herself and her health. And just a lot of shit that she doesn't want me to say, because she'd be embarrassed, probably mad at me about it too. But I could tell this story and every story in between my life, and it would probably take 15 to 20 hours, because there's just a lot of shit that I went through, a lot of shit my sister went through, a lot of shit my dad went through, a lot of shit my dad put us both through, a lot of shit my mom's always put us through. But I stayed with my sister while I had a broken right wrist, and I got a soft cast for it, and I was supposed to have it on for 2 months. I kept it on for 4 months. I never went back and got the hard cast, so my right-handed wrist never fully healed correctly. And so when it's like this, raining, my wrist hurts. When it's gonna snow, my wrist hurts. But I know eventually I left my sister's. I went back to my mom's for a little bit, kicked me out again. So I stayed in a trailer, an abandoned trailer in the trailer park. This dude Jeff I knew had a really hot wife. I don't know what went on with him and her, but eventually she left. And I always bagged on him because, like, I think she was probably the best thing about him in his life. But eventually they moved out of his trailer, and the trailer park never fixed it up. So when my mom kicked me out the last time, that's where I stayed in that trailer for a few weeks until I met someone who wasn't an enemy, but more so competition. Her name is Taya. Taya was my competition, apparently, because I was selling dope to a lot of people, and it was just personal sacks here and there to you guys, and, you know. Well, she went to go sell some of her dope in the same trailer park and tried my dope, and I remember her saying she got a little mad because the dope I had was better than what she was getting. So eventually we met up through a guy she was fucking. His name was Carrie. She's gonna get mad because she doesn't like that name. Carrie treated her like shit. But I didn't treat her a ton better. But spoke to Taya probably about a couple weeks ago. We've been talking for the past month and a half. And Taya told me that she really honestly loved me more than a lot of other people. I guess because I didn't do her too dirty, and I didn't really take a ton of advantage of her, and always by her side. And Taya's got a lot of internal struggles. Even now, she's always had the dream of this fast life, and Taya has like ambition to be super fucking rich, but still not get to that point. Even now, there's always something holding her back, and I think she just can't live life alone, and it just makes her sad or go back into her own ways. But Taya, a lot of people wanted Taya. A lot of people wanted Taya, but somehow I ended up with her, and so I moved in with her to her parents' house, and her parents' house was, that shit should have been condemned from before I even got there. They had a lot of shit there, and the deal with me and her is we like to do dope. We like to smoke meth, and she did a lot of little things that she realized she did, but I don't think she understands how fucked up it was. But whenever we did dope, I'd like to stay up. I want to stay up for a couple days, a week, 2 weeks at most. But living with Taya and being with Taya and doing dope and partying with Taya while we're living our life, she's like, nope, we're going to get all tweaked out from the time that we're up, but we're going to go to sleep at night. And it took me like weeks, maybe a month or two, to finally be able to get tweaked out like her and then go to sleep at night. But see, before me and her got together, I was doing a lot more dope than what she was doing. When we got into a relationship and I was with her, I was 100% faithful because I felt that's how a man should be. And regardless of the drugs, I didn't let it control like how I looked at things. But a lot of people liked me. I was a decent fucking person, even though I was a tweaker. I wasn't out to rob or skimp anybody or scam anybody or trick anybody. You know, I'd give them decent prices and decent bags. And a lot of time after I'd make a sale or 2-3 sales, I'd go around and just bullshit with people and, you know, hang out with them. And next thing you know, we're doing their dope. And I ain't got to reach what I have in mind. So I would take it back to Taya. Me and Taya would smoke the dope. And just recently talking to Taya, she always thought that I was fucking somebody. Or I slept with the homeboy's mom while we were together. Or this happened while we were together. Or that happened while we were together. And I'm like, no, I ain't done nothing. And she, even still to this day, she finds it hard to believe. But that's what happens when you live a life and it's filled with nothing but insecurities. But eventually, I took a look in the mirror one day. I think I was 108 pounds at the age of 20. 5'3", 5'4". About 108 pounds. And I seen myself in the mirror, and I actually stopped and looked. And I looked tweaked the fuck out. My face still looked decent, but my body was sucked up. And having to constantly fight and argue. And one day, one morning, Taya will tell you a different story, but one morning it's probably like 10, 11 o'clock. I don't know, it was the night before. It was the night before. Me and Taya had an argument. She came in and I called her something like, you crazy son of a bitch. Well, she doesn't like being called crazy. So she did this whole maneuver thing, what I can remember. She ran back in the room and jumped on the couch, and once she landed on the couch, she jumped on the bed, and I just put my hands up and I brought my knee up kind of like this. Kind of like this, but I brought my knee up even higher, and it hit her right in her cooch. So we didn't know this, but she ended up having a miscarriage supposedly because of that. And if it did, I'm sorry. If it didn't, I'm still sorry. But I wasn't going to sit there and be attacked. Taya says to this day that I need her and her shit just because. And I've never really done that just because type shit. Never done the just because type shit. Supposedly later that night she ended up having a miscarriage and haven't been able to have a child since. Whether it happened because of that, it still kind of fucks me up here. But at the same time, you know, shit happened. We were tweaked out. I still have a really good memory of it. She says she has a better memory of it. You know. And when we talked, so we haven't spoken for the past like week, 2 weeks. she swears up and down that's what it was. And the next day, I just looked at myself and I'm like, I can't do this. So I got up and she asked, where are you going? And I said, we're done. I can't do this anymore. I didn't realize how much in love she was with me. I thought it was because we're just partying or we're, having sex and I'm around for you. But apparently it was love, according to her. And I can see that because I loved her and I cared about her. The sex was good, even though she wasn't. Well, we're not going to get into the specifics, but the sex was good. She was really affectionate, more than any girl I've ever been with. More than the, week, 3 days, 4 days that me and Deb were together. The 15 years that me and Caroline were together. Or 14. Well, technically we were together like 13. And lived together a total of 16. But Taya was real affectionate. I do remember that. I remember Taya's affection very much so. A lot of hand holding, a lot of kissing, a lot of touching, rubbing, non-sexual stuff. And I just left. And I went to my Aunt Sarah's house. I ran into my Aunt Sarah and had her pick me up on the Lion Bridge, and I just bounced and left Taya. Left her drug addict mother and father, rest their souls. Even her oldest brother, he was cool, but he was also a drug addict. He also did time in jail. Tried to get along with the younger brother, but he was weird. Not the youngest, but the younger one. But I went and stayed in Oakdale with my aunt, and I got clean for a little bit. But then my aunt turns around and asks me, hey, can you get me some dope? So me and my aunt did some dope at her place a few times, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I said, I have to get clean. So what did I do? Called up my dad and said, hey, I'm over here at my aunt's house. I've been getting clean. I lied to him. So that way he would probably give me a place to stay. Because eventually my dad got his own place over on Park Place in Modesto, right behind the Prescott Estates. If anybody knows the Prescott Estates, that shit used to be the hood. But when he moved behind the Prescott Estates, apparently his mother-in-law, my grandmother-in-law, Jaquita, moved out a tenant. My dad and his girlfriend Brenda and her son Jade, not my dad's, my stepbrother, moved in there. And I lied to my dad and said, hey, I've been at Aunt Sandra's getting clean. I can't do this anymore. I need to I need a place to stay. My dad is, the heart that my dad has, even though he's an asshole. Well, as long as you're clean and you stay clean and you try to get your shit together over here, that's okay. Just try to bring your way over here. So eventually I found my way that way, and my dad gave me a place to stay. It's going on an hour now. We'll pick up another time. Beginning of my life at Park Place. See ya.